On this episode of AV Week, CES goes virtual for the very first time. What were the big takeaways from the show? How do you create an interactive experience online? And figuring out 4K for end users. All that and more. Next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 491, recorded Friday, January 15th, 2021. Corona Tech.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Atlas IED, innovative audio solutions for every business environment, and by FSR.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audio-visual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. With us to discuss the news and information we have gathered for this second week now of January. First and foremost, Dawn Mead. You know her as AV Dawn. We can't tell you where she works because then we'd have to do things to you. How are you, ma'am?
That sounds wrong, but very good, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Also with us, a young man that I actually just met in person about a year or so ago through our friend, mutual friend, Mr. Cristato. But his name is Paul Richards. He's with PTZ Optics, but also has a fantastic channel called Stream Gigs. Welcome, sir.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And last but not least, a very, I'm not going to call her an old friend because I'm older than she is, but I've known her a long time, Rachel Bradshaw, who just recently joined one of my favorite PR firms, Castor Communications. So how are you, madam?
I'm fabulous. Good to see you, Tim.
Good to see you. Good to see you. So we're actually I'll start with Dawn on this. But speaking of Castor and Rachel, they just finished up a virtual trade show. One of the things that Kim Lancaster and the team there does is they cover and they support technology companies. CES is typically one of their busiest times of the year. However, now they're not in Vegas this year. They are virtual. So this was the first and biggest show of the year to go virtual, Dawn. They announced it back in August. And so as they're doing that, they're obviously ramping up and getting all of the parts and pieces from a virtual standpoint. As you're watching this week, what were your takeaways from this virtual CES? What were some things that they did well, some things they didn't do so well, or what were some of the highlights from a product standpoint?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I haven't been able to sit in on a lot of sessions. This week was a week where I actually had to go back into the office for a couple of days, which these days is, scary. But I think that they're doing a good job of getting the information out there. And I mean, the problem with CES, even over and above like, your infocoms and things, is it's just massive. It's just so many, infocom and some shows like that. It's like, this is AV. We have the sound people, we have the signage people, we have the, guts in the middle people. That's it. When you're talking CES, you've got phone guys and car guys. I saw something that they GM showed a flying car at CES. You had everything from tech that we're caring about, DisplayPort 2.0, for instance. There were announcements on that, things that impact us as an AV community, clear up to fancy, expensive, but reusable, rechargeable face masks for the post-COVID world. So it's just so massive that, even just flipping through to see the highlights, it could take days. So, but I do like the fact that a lot of the virtual trade shows, they're making the shows more accessible to people that normally would not be able to fly to Vegas, normally would not be able to take the days off and go and attend, see the announcements first up, or, at most we'd get to see a press release, whereas now they're doing a little more with like videos and virtual press. Things like that, it's big positive. I hope that Infocom and CES and ISE and all of the shows do keep a virtual component going forward for just that reason, so that more folks can attend virtually if they can't make it in person. But I also, this year and last year, I said this on a different show, I feel really bad for all those sweet little old ladies in Vegas that usually scan our badges at classes, because, they're not going to have their bingo money and their little fun money if, working their jobs at the convention center with the badge scanners. So, it's really a kind of a mixed bag, but I'm excited that the virtual show concept is taking off.
I hate to tell you this, but that's not bingo money. I'm just going to point that out.
Well,
there.
yeah, in some cases,
Vegas.
yeah, it's their outright living money, but
yeah. I was going the other way with it's more gambling money, but okay.
Well,
all right.
Bingo is gambling, Tim. To
either
be clear.
way. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, technically, but don't. All right. Rachel Bradshaw, pipe type. So both from a PR standpoint, but also as somebody who used to help a trade show, i.e. Infocom, what were your takeaways from this virtual? And Dawn's right. It is the biggest, I could be wrong here, but I don't think I am, the biggest trade show in North America from a calendar standpoint. So it going virtual, what were your takeaways?
I kind of want to bounce the ball over to Paul on this one because he is really expert at creating engaging virtual experiences. But I think it's really telling what Dawn said about how she hasn't been like totally immersed in CES this year. What a weird year, right? Normally for Caster as an organization, we would have been in Las Vegas for a week already. You know, we would have said goodbye to all of our families on New Year's Eve. And we would have had a hellish holiday preparing for CES because it's just the busiest time of the year for us. And this year it was strangely quiet leading up to CES. And it's been my experience that, people are paying attention to the news coming out of CES, but they are just not immersed in it in the way that, you would be obviously if you were physically there. But even if you're not physically there, the way that people typically pay just rapt attention to everything that's happening in Las Vegas in early January. And I think that's down a bit to the approach that CES has taken to virtual events, which is not the only approach that exists to virtual events. I do think more broadly, and I hope that like any of my friends who are hearing this podcast won't be offended that I steal their smart ideas, but I've been talking to a lot of smart people about virtual CES this week. And I do think that there is a lot of interesting wellness technology happening at CES this year. Giles Sutton, who is the co-interim CEO of Cedia, said to me earlier this week, it's all Corona tech. And that applies not just to the stuff that's explicitly health technology or wellness technology, but all of the technologies that are being informed by this newfound awareness of how important it is to exert control over your environment with respect to health and wellness. So all of the touchless digital signage technologies that we're seeing right now is in essence Corona tech. All of the technologies that we see that focus on being able to control things at a distance or with fewer people is in a sense Corona tech. The smart doorbells that we're seeing that allow you to check somebody's temperature before they enter your home. It's all informed by the way that the past year has changed the culture to make us probably permanently more aware of the ways that we put ourselves at risk by moving around in the world and how technology can help us mitigate those risks.
Absolutely. Well, Paul, Rachel mentioned you and bouncing it over to you because she's right. You created probably one of the more immersive events that we had last year. I'm not saying that just because I was involved with it, because it really was. And not for nothing, but the college radio part of me was in love with G Love 25 years ago and got to see him live-ish, so that was also awesome. But talk about it from two standpoints. Also from the standpoint of somebody who has literally written the book on creating virtual events, but also somebody who's produced a number of them. Look at it from that standpoint, but also from a manufacturing standpoint, right? As a manufacturer who would typically go to a trade show, maybe not CES, maybe sometimes. What was your takeaways from this one?
Well, to Dawn's, one of the things that Dawn said that struck me is that it probably was the best year to attend CES without actually being there. The creators of CES definitely put some time into the production value. Who are the hosts going to be? How are we going to make this as interactive as possible? They also are dealing with almost an impossible paradox of how do you create an intimate experience with millions of people? It's impossible, right? They weren't using Zoom breakout rooms. There's just too many people to do that with. From a manufacturer's perspective, we did attend CES in 2020 or maybe it was 2019, but it was a great show, because there's a lot of new techie people that you can get exposed to that don't even know what Infocom is, to be honest, yet they're influencers on YouTube. They are, well-known tech people who are tech writers for The Verge, for example. Yep. So the audience at CES is great. But from a manufacturer's standpoint, if you're not Microsoft, it's very easy to get lost into the mix. And if you're not on the official agenda, the exhibitor list is just too long. And what they were doing from a virtual event, everybody watches that main broadcast, but the trickle-down effect for the small to medium-sized manufacturers, we haven't seen a great return on investment with virtual events unless it's a small event. If it's a small event, small group, you can get into those intimate breakout rooms. And we're talking about streaming technology. We're talking about video communications technology. It's very relevant. But CES did their best. And, you mentioned we had G-Love at our Small Presence Summit conference. I would have loved to have Keith Urban and the lineup that they had at CES. That certainly would draw some crowds. So it was a good year. If you like virtual events, this was the year to attend virtually. But there was no in-person experience. And, you love turning that corner and seeing the new, pub style pong table that you can put in your basement. And you love bumping into celebrities. That happens. These YouTube celebrities are running around with your cameras. Who's that guy? Oh, he's got 5 million followers. Oh, well, I just bumped into him and we chatted. That doesn't happen virtually, sadly.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree with you. But really quickly, just as a clarification here, because different people's ideas is have different numbers. You said a small intimate event. Granted, CES again is the biggest ginormous event, at least in the U.S. I don't think that I would qualify the President's Summit as small, though. What for your standpoint, what would you consider a small, I guess, manageable from the standpoint of getting intimate event, like from a number standpoint?
Well, it's interesting you say that, and I'll reference a couple pieces of technology and things that I've looked at to understand that. One is, Zoom limits their Zoom meetings to 300 people usually in like the basic pro license, and that's been studied. In fact, Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book about it. I think it was his book called Blink, but I can't remember. It was a tipping point where they studied organizations beyond 300. You just can't remember everybody's name anymore. Yeah. And you just can't make those connections, let alone try to do that in one virtual event. We're talking about organizations who are building their companies with units of 300 people because they're trying to learn all those 300 people by face, by name. They work together all year round, and that's how they do it, let alone a virtual event. On Twitch, going the virtual route, the live streaming route, a lot of influencers that I talk about and live streamers, this is a really funny statistic, but it comes up over and over again. Once you get over like 100 or 200 live viewers, it's too many people to recognize who's who, and they hire chat room moderators to try to figure it out for them. But it's interesting study that once you go past like 300, 400 people, the intimacy of the viewer to the content creator who's talking to the chat room, they actually start making less money on Twitch. So for the people who make their living on Twitch, and there's Twitch donations and bits and things of that nature, the ones who can cultivate a super intimate 100, 200, 300 person live stream experience actually end up making more per person through the donation system than those who are getting thousands and can't create those intimate experiences. So, at the President's Summit, I think we had like 200 or 300 people watching live, and then we would have like 50 or 60 in these breakout rooms. And, you get to know those people. And, at the CES level, that's why I mentioned it as a paradox, because they're trying to accommodate so much, but they were kind of unable to divide it up evenly and allow people to create. Now, they did have Microsoft and Microsoft Teams, and they were creating rooms for people to go in to talk to vendors. And, from my experience, that is good. And people do come in, and you don't get 1,000 people at once. You get a couple people coming in and out. So That's my thoughts on it. Trying to go above 300 in a single space is, gets to be too much.
It makes a whole lot of sense. Go ahead.
Yeah. Tim, can I jump in on that?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with what Paul said. And we've seen this in our own industry before. We always come and do our post-Infocom shows. And Infocom is not near the scope and scale of CES, just in sheer volume of both vendors and people. But we talk about, you go to the show to like have your private meetings and FaceTime with some people, but also just to like run around the booths and look at things. You'll get that intimate like demo explanation at a smaller regional show or when your rep comes into your company. We don't rely on the big show to give us the information we need for purchasing more than we rely on that smaller, intimate. And, it also speaks to why sci-fi conventions and magazine or Comic-Cons, you get those autograph lines. Since the pandemic, there's this thing now called Cameo. Mm-hmm. And Cameo, you can just reach out to your favorite celeb, and for probably the cost of a picture at Comic-Con, you get a one-on-one video from them or special greeting from them or something. So there's a lot to be said for that, keeping things intimate and just the psychology of humans, I think. So
yeah. And to pile on as a recovering event organizer, I think that something that Paul does really, really effectively is create layers of intimacy at his events. Like if you go to any Stream Geeks event or the upcoming House of Worship Summit or the Presence Summit, you'll find that there are activities that are designed to be mass activities. There are activities that are designed to be group activities, and there are activities that are designed to be intimate activities. And it's the same thing at a physical trade show. You have the floor, which is this mass activity. You have group activities with your conferences and your breakouts, and you have more intimate activities with dinners and one-on-one meetings. And you need all of those layers of interaction to create a really compelling event. It seems to happen pretty organically at a physical trade show because, like Paul was saying, you have that kismet, right? Like you meet people, you connect with them, you decide to go to dinner together, intimacy happens, boom, nobody even has to plan it necessarily, although we do obsessively. But with a virtual event, you have a twofold problem. You have to create those layers of intimacy, which is really, really hard. And then you have to convince people to participate in them, which can feel really, really unnatural. It's not easy.
No, it's not. It goes down to the incentives that you give people, whether that's physical, whether that's the swag or the tchotchkes, or is those connections, right? And I'll point back real quickly before we get on to the next story. I met Frank Paticala, who's now taken over one of our RT AV show. Through one of those, those connections, right? It was a breakout room, actually at Infocom, the happy hour we did, right? And he and I ended up together in the room together. I'd never met him in person, obviously. I'd known him on social media, but had never met him. We had a connection, right? And so that's an incentive, is making those connections. So absolutely. Next story actually comes to us from our friends over at Innovate on the Net. RTI has released a new video over IP platform. This allows you to send 4K, and this is the important part here, 4K over a 1 gig network. Is also HDCP 2.2 compliant, gives you 60 hertz refresh rate. If you're looking for 120, do not look at this yet. Possibly at further upgrades down the road, but currently it is only 60 hertz, but it's still 4K. Rachel, I'm going to start with you on this as somebody who's been around the industry for a long time and seen every evolution of the next greatest resolution, whether that's 4K or HD or True HD or True 4K. And yes, Sony and some others are already talking about 8K. But as AV over IP has evolved, let's say over the last 5 years, initially it was just 1080 that folks were talking about. And now we have gotten to the point where we're talking about 4K. When we're looking at this, what is it that the end users, right, are really kind of asking for? Is it that the end user pulling on them saying, hey, we need 4K, or is it the manufacturers going, hey, we've got the latest, greatest thing and we can do it over IP now?
It used to be really the latter. My whole attitude towards 4K used to kind of be wait, but why? Because I felt like it was all tied up in this spec race that had gone well beyond, the acuity of the human eye to just like, what's the next specification we can sell people? But as the use case for 4K evolves, I think that's changing, especially as you see more people using 4K, not merely, and I don't want to dismiss this, but seriously, not merely to transmit a single high resolution image, but to capture an image that can then be used in more ways. I think there's a lot of interest in, for instance, in lecture or event capture applications and being able to use 4K to use a single camera to capture multiple shots.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Then you have a compelling end user use case that's like, okay, you are making this easier for me. You are saving me money. You're ultimately putting less pressure on my network. This is something that I want. It's more than something that I want. It's something that I need. And I think that the network case is evolving to be more compelling alongside the application case.
Mm-hmm. Paul, same kind of question as you were talking with end users, and just for clarification, everybody understands this. PTZ Optics makes cameras that you guys sell cameras that, and a lot of them are 4K. A lot of them can go on the network. You guys also leverage the NDI platform quite a bit as well. So as you're talking to your clients, the resellers, as well as their clients, the places where they're going in, what kind of feedback are you getting from those systems and those end users as to what exactly it is they're looking for?
Well, I don't think they think in resolutions and specs as much as how easy is this going to be to use and what is it going to look like. Okay. I remember helping a school upgrade from SD to HD, and they told me, wow, we can now read the words on the boards on the blackboard. And we can actually read it now. Is 4K going to make that much of a difference? Like SD to HD was like, I can now read the words on the whiteboard and the blackboard. 4K becomes, can we actually do something with this? To Rachel's point, is it a video production where we can now get multiple shots inside of that 4K image? Because 1080 is good enough, okay? It's great. Once you go to 4K, you're like, do I really need to see every whisker on this guy's face? Now, so in that regard, with our company, we do get into a lot of video production where it's like, okay, 4K over IP, that's pretty nice because now I can do these virtual camera shots and I can start to really make use of 4K. In fact, the webcam I'm using right now is a 4K webcam, but Zoom's only using it for 640 by 480. But it's great that I can zoom in, 8x without it getting pixelated, right? So 4K has a space, and it's going to be great, but it's not like a huge replacement. Now, video over IP, pretty cool. An example of a customer really loving video over IP with a PTZ Optics camera. One Ethernet cable can power the camera, control the camera, and you can get video and audio from the camera. So that used to be an SDI cable. That used to be an RS-232 cable. That used to be hire an electrician to put power in. So video over IP, I am totally all about. But my question is the 4K thing really going to be what customers really want? It's not about that. It's about showing them what they can do with it. And how easy are you going to make it to use? The bigger question is, how do you get that video into Zoom? Right? How do you get that video into Microsoft Teams? Where's the virtual webcam driver that does that? Which is something, we're working on and other people have available too. The big announcement is getting that video over IP into the things that customers actually want. How easy is that? And how easy is it for them to control that 4K? Because they probably don't need it. If they're using a Zoom call, 640 by 480. It's maybe you're getting 720p. We're in a world where streaming in 1080 is totally fine. I mean, sure, you can stream in 4K, but are people really going to get it in 4K? Do they have enough bandwidth? So I still think it's a spec thing. It's more to me about let's integrate this into something that's usable and let's make the user interface easier so that it actually does what the customers need. Because at the end of the day, a video feed is a video feed. It's clear in HD already. 4K is a little clearer. How are you making it easier for the customer to actually do something with all those extra pixels?
Yeah. All right, Dawn, you are the customer now. So do you need 4K? Do you want 4K? What is it what do you want?
So I'm going to wear two hats briefly. Just
okay.
Up until a couple years ago when I was an integrator, the answer to that question 99% of the time was, we don't need 4K. You're just paying a lot of money for, as Paul said, a great signal that won't travel through the wires that you have, or if they do travel through the wires or, go over IP 4K, won't work in the device that you're putting it in or won't show on this. We've been talking about this since 4K came out, and it was like there were 2 Blu-rays that you could watch on 4K. And you'd have to buy the 4K camera or device, the 4K cables, the 4K TV, and it was just this big, massive thing. So 98, probably, maybe 95% of all your average customers don't really need it. Paul's right. HD is good enough. Now, where I am now as an end user, happen to be in one of that 5% that would need 4K because, simulation, design engineering, when you're pulling up design documents, you have a bunch of engineers, pulling things around and trying to figure out how to fix that little thing in this, machine. That sort of thing is where you need the 4K. You could get the bigger picture, you can follow it, you can zoom right in, and in that regard, like the medical field, the military industrial complex, all of these types of folks that are doing the simulation, doing the modeling, they're the folks that really need it. And it's exciting that we can now do 4K over Ethernet. Like Paul said, one cable, don't have to worry about it. But then again, the situation I'm in currently with my company, you don't think about the network. You don't breathe on the network. You don't, even if you build your own separate parallel network, you have to have physical distance from the for real network. And there's a whole lot of extra hoops to jump through. But it's something that I'm going to keep an eye on for sure. For sure.
All right, very good. That'll be a good place to stop. Thank you all so much. Mr. Paul Richards from PTZ Optics. Thank you, sir. How do people get a hold of you or PTZ Optics or subscribe to Stream Geeks?
You can follow us pretty much at PTZ Optics or at Stream Geeks. We're pretty focused on the live streaming and broadcast space, and we're streaming all the time, so we'd love to have you guys join.
All right, very good. Rachel Bradshaw from Caster Communications. Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks for having me on. You can find me at rachel@castercom.com. You can find Caster at castercom.com. And you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, cross-platform at Tempurity.
And you can find her on her own podcast called AV Super Friends.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Come listen to the AV Super Friends every other week. This is our higher ed and AV podcast where I have 4 smart friends who say very intelligent things, and I come on and act obnoxious.
Oh, whatever. She's incredibly smart as well. So also, last but not least, Dawn Mead, AV Dawn. Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks for having me, Tim. Folks, as Tim said, you can't find me online where I work because that's a big secret. Shh. But you can always find me on the socials, AV Dawn or Dawn Mead. And of course, you can find me here on AVNation.tv, hosting the AV Social Show and turning up on AVWeek as much as Tim will let me.
That's fairly accurate. For me, for Tim Albright, don't follow me. As I mentioned last week, I am still bemoaning the fact that the Bears couldn't get past the Saints, the second oldest quarterback in the league. But that's beside the point.
Don't talk to me about football, dude.
I know.
Undefeated season, down the tubes.
Dawn's a Steelers fan, so she at least thought she was going to make it farther in the playoffs. I knew I wasn't. But go by the website if you would, please. AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. You'll find programs like this and a host of others. While you're there, check out our sponsors. These are folks who help us financially, help us bring you AVWeek and ResiWeek and all the others. A couple cool things coming down the pipeline. First of all, once this posts on Monday, it will be the final round of the AVNation Reader's Choice Awards. So you have nominated, you have voted. This is it, kids. Last 2 weeks of January. Go and vote. Also, Mr. Matt Scott is having some really cool conversations over on ResiWeek, so check that out as well. So all that and more at avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. That's all the time we have for AV Week.